the most prestigious hospital in the city, is facing the biggest medical crisis in its 50-year history. Post-surgery infection rates have surged by 60%. Dozens of families are waiting for news of their loved ones. The press has started asking questions, and the hospital's leadership is completely paralyzed. 15 top doctors, 3 straight days of emergency meetings, millions of dollars spent on consultants. The result? Nothing. Until one man, someone everyone had overlooked, a single father working the night shift in a pale gray uniform, happened to walk into the meeting room after hours. And in 30 seconds, he spotted what the entire team of experts had failed to see. The miracle wasn't that he was smarter than the specialists. It was that someone was wise enough to listen to a voice from where no one expected. Drop your location in the comments. This story will make you believe that miracles can come from the most unexpected places. 3 days, 15 experts, 6 emergency meetings, millions of dollars poured into consultancy fees. And what do we have? Dr. Sloan Mercer's voice cut through the room, cold and sharp like a scalpel slicing flesh. Precise. Merciless. Not a crack left open for excuses. A disaster. Right there on the screen. No one spoke. Rows of blinding white lab coats bowed low in silence. Beads of sweat slid quietly down collars, clinging like evidence that could not be hidden. The tension was so thick it felt as though it could be carved apart with a blade. At the center, a massive LED screen glared with a deadly red. The mortality chart shot upward, sketching a nightmare curve. Infection data poured down each column, like a digital flood devouring every trace of hope. "You have 5 minutes." Sloan paused, his eyes sweeping across every face in the room. "I want a solution, not an explanation, not an apology. One solution." The click of his shoes struck a dry rhythm against the tiled floor. Then the door closed with a cold snap. In the room remained only the stale smell of cold coffee and nervous sweat. Beyond the glass wall, the hospital pulsed like a massive organism. Patients were pushed along corridors in wheelchairs. Nurses swapped shifts, trading charts in haste. And in the middle of that flow, a man in a pale gray uniform bent quietly to pick up a discarded paper cup from the floor. But his gaze didn't linger on the cleanup. It locked firmly on the whiteboard inside the conference room, where a treatment protocol chart sprawled across it, like a desperate map of a dying city. Gavin Brooks, 36 years old, single father. Night shift at St. Mary Hospital. Through his cheap headphones, a faint jazz tune played, the fragile soundtrack that kept him awake through endless nights. What people saw, a janitor quietly pushing a mop cart down the hallway, checking each room, cleaning what the day shift had left behind. What they didn't know, he had once been the top medical student at Harvard Medical School. 2 years in a row at the top of his class. Research awards, a clinical rotation at Mass General. A brilliant path stretched wide open before him. Then Sarah was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Then Lena let out her rushed cry, born 3 months premature, so small that every breath was a gamble with fate. And Gavin was forced to choose between degrees and family, between the dream he once chased and the life his daughter desperately needed. It wasn't a difficult choice, just a heartbreaking one. 5 years since Sarah's passing, Gavin still carried 3 night shifts a week, just enough to cover rent for a 1-bedroom apartment, just enough for Lena to have a decent breakfast and to join the science club at school without worrying about the fees. Not enough to erase from his memory everything he had once learned about medicine. In the conference room, the lights still burned cold. The last team had left in frustration, abandoning crumpled notes and the suffocating stench of stress. Gavin entered out of habit, hand on the trash bin. On the wall, the whiteboard stretched like a battlefield of defeat. Twisting formulas, treatment diagrams tangled into a hopeless maze, scribbles of failed, retry, scrawled and erased, leaving behind smeared shadows. Gavin raised his cloth, ready to wipe it all away, as he had done hundreds of times. But his hand froze, his eyes narrowed, his head tilted, like a bird straining to catch a sound from far, far away. "Wait," he whispered, just loud enough for himself to hear. "There's something wrong here." Gavin set the cloth down. He stepped slowly toward the whiteboard, his eyes scanning the treatment chart as though he were reading a language only he could understand. "They're treating the symptoms instead of the cause," he murmured, his index finger tracing the broken lines of logic. A fundamental mistake, and extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. His gaze stopped at a specific section, the timing of prophylactic antibiotics. The sequence was off. The medication was administered too early, before the body was ready to absorb it effectively. The dosage interval created a golden window for bacteria to develop resistance. Not rocket science, just basic pharmacology. Gavin glanced around. The hallway outside still buzzed with footsteps and rolling carts. No one noticed. He reached for a red marker. Carefully, he erased a section of the timeline, redrew the sequence with the correct timing, circled the two swapped variables, drew a firm line under the miscalculation about drug interaction. He stepped back, arms crossed, nodded slightly. "We need to change the approach completely, from reactive to proactive. Prevent the infection before fighting it afterward. And you think you understand better than the doctors here?" The voice came from behind him, calm, but cold as ice. Gavin froze, turned his head slowly. Standing in the doorway, Dr. Sloan Mercer, director of St. Mary Hospital. A perfectly tailored black suit. Hair neatly tied back, not a strand out of place. Eyes as blue and cold as steel, piercing him from head to toe. Under the fluorescent light, she looked like a figure stepped straight off the cover of Fortune magazine. Power, untouchable, and right now, clearly not pleased. I wasn't trying to disrupt anything," Gavin stammered, his voice trembling slightly. "I just noticed something." "Noticed what?" Her voice cut in, sharp as a scalpel. "Something that doesn't add up." Intuitively, Sloan stepped inside. Her heels struck a steady rhythm against the cold white tile. She said nothing more, only stopped in front of the whiteboard, her eyes scanning the fresh red lines Gavin had just drawn. Silence thickened. Gavin could hear every beat of his heart pounding against the sweat-soaked fabric of his back. Then Sloan pulled a tablet from her jacket pocket. Perfectly manicured fingers tapped quickly, inputting the exact parameters Gavin had corrected. 10 seconds. 15. 20. The screen lit up. Simulation complete. 22% reduction in infection rate. Her voice flat, unwavering. 68% reduction in antibiotic resistance risk. Average recovery time shortened by 2.3 days. She lifted her head. For the first time, truly looked him in the eye. "Name?" "Gavin Brooks." "Position?" "Janitor, night shift, education?" Gavin hesitated, lowering his voice. "Harvard Medical School." Dropped out in the final year, Sloan set the tablet down, her eyes still fixed on him. "Why?" "My wife had cancer. Someone had to stay to care for our daughter." A long silence. Sloan studied him as if she were reading a complex medical file. "Do you realize what you've just done, Mr. Brooks?" "I only hoped not to disturb anyone," Gavin replied cautiously. "I just noticed something that didn't fit." "Didn't fit how?" Gavin pointed to the board. They administered prophylactic antibiotics too early, before the surgical site was properly prepared. It creates a false sense of security, then gives the bacteria time to adapt. Go on. And the interval between the pre-op and post-op doses. There's a gap, large enough for an infection to form and develop resistance before the next dose takes effect. Sloane folded her arms. You explain like what? Like you're teaching first-year med students. Gavin shrugged. I'm used to it. My daughter's only 6. I have to explain everything, simply. It's become a reflex. For example? For example? He paused a beat. All right. The body is like a house. Infection is the thief. Antibiotics are the guards. Sloane raised an eyebrow. Right now, they're posting guards before the alarm system is installed. Then they're leaving gaps in the shifts. That's when the thief walks right in. And your solution? First, lock the doors, set the alarms, then place guards on a seamless rotation, no gaps. No thief gets through. Sloane glanced at the whiteboard, then the tablet, then back at him. Interesting, she concluded. Not praise, just acknowledgement. Gavin smiled faintly. And I think you speak very formally. Formally? Like you're running a board meeting. Not talking to a person, Sloane paused. I manage what I can control, Mr. Brooks. Especially words, because in this profession, every word can mean life or death. Casual conversation is a luxury. Gavin nodded slightly. That must be very lonely. The words came out stronger than he intended. Sloane's expression faltered for the briefest moment before settling back into its professional mask. Loneliness is part of the job. No, Gavin said softly. Loneliness is a choice. Silence. But this time, it was different. Less tension, more reflection. You'll attend the strategic meeting tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, as an observer. I don't need... That's not a suggestion, Mr. Brooks. That's an instruction, but my daughter... She'll have someone to make her breakfast. And if necessary, even a ticket to the zoo this weekend. Gavin blinked, startled. You investigated me? Sloane tilted her head slightly. I investigate everyone who might affect this hospital. She paused at the doorway, glanced back. And after tonight, your daughter has one more reason to be proud of her father. She's already proud. Good. Then now, she can brag about it to her friends. The door closed, the sound of heels fading away. Gavin stood alone, facing the whiteboard streaked with red ink, and the sensation that the world had just shifted beneath his feet. Gavin could barely sleep, not from nerves, but because Lena refused to close her eyes until she'd heard every detail. So, she actually walked in? The little girl's eyes sparkled under the nightlight. And you weren't scared? Gavin gently brushed her hair. Sweetheart, when I once held your mother's hand in the hospital and had to tell you that you couldn't ask about her anymore, no director on earth can make me afraid. Lena blinked, then smiled. Not a child's smile, but the kind that silently said, I understand you, Dad. She leaned close, whispering, I think she likes you. Gavin chuckled, pulling her into his arms. Then he stared at the ceiling for a very, very long time. 7:50 the next morning. Gavin stood outside Conference Room C at St. Mary Hospital. The cleanest navy polo shirt he owned, still marked by a faint ink stain near the pocket. Over his shoulder, a worn backpack carrying nothing but a stack of notes, a ballpoint pen, and a watercolor painting Lena had made. A figure with a stethoscope, holding a shining star. Inside the room, white lab coats drifting like ghosts around the central screen. X-rays, charts, and recovery data lit up the glass walls. The air was thick with antiseptic and pressure. And then she entered. Sloane Mercer. Gavin caught sight of her before she spoke. The room shifted instantly. Doctors straightened their backs. Voices dropped. The temperature seemed to fall by 2 degrees. She glanced at him, deliberately, before gesturing toward a vacant chair at the edge. "That's your seat." Gavin didn't ask permission. He simply sat down. "Begin." Sloane's voice sliced the air into pieces. "Yesterday, we witnessed a miscalculation, one that nearly cost us a multi-phase contract and exposed critical weaknesses in our treatment protocol." She tapped her tablet. On the large screen appeared a crude sketch in red ink, the very marks Gavin had drawn. "But last night, someone left us a gift." The room stirred. Several eyes darted toward Gavin, then quickly away. "This adjustment reduces systemic error by 60%, cuts average delay by 22 milliseconds, and forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth." Sloane paused, letting the silence press down. "That expertise can look very different from what we've been conditioned to expect." The room went dead quiet. Then the creak of a chair. Dr. Jason Marlowe, the head of surgery, MD from Johns Hopkins, sat upright, his face stern, his eyes cold. "Permission to speak," he said, voice so polite it only made the hidden blade beneath sharper. "On what basis can we be sure this isn't just a lucky coincidence?" "Run the model," Sloane replied curtly. Jason hesitated, then keyed in the parameters. The simulation spun through multiple scenarios. The results held steady. Success rates remained high across all patient groups. The screen filled with green data. "It could still just be luck," Jason muttered. For the first time, Gavin spoke. Calm. Steady. "Maybe. But if that's the case, I hope we're smart enough to learn from luck, when it walks in carrying a mop." A few chuckles rippled around the room. Sloane did not laugh, but she gave the slightest nod, the kind a judge makes when faced with an argument that cannot be denied. After the meeting, Sloane caught up with Gavin near the elevator. "You defended yourself well," she said. "I wasn't trying to do anything." Which is exactly why it worked. They stepped into the cabin, silence at first. Only the glow of the digital numbers ticking floor by floor. Sloane stared at the display, then spoke. "Jason won't stop." "Is he afraid of me?" "No. He's afraid of what you represent." Gavin tilted his head. "And what's that?" "Change. Loss of control. And the reality that maybe we've been wrong for a very long time." Gavin nodded slightly. "I know that feeling. When my wife died, I was angry at anyone who dared suggest there might be another way to live. Believing that pain was inevitable was so much easier than admitting I might have chosen differently." The elevator doors slid open. They stepped into the lobby. The silence stretched. Sloane said softly, "Thank you. For today. I only said what I saw." Which is exactly what we need. That afternoon, Gavin returned to his usual shift. Back in the gray uniform, back with the cart and the mop. But the atmosphere had changed. Doctors nodded as they passed him. Not just interns, but people he never imagined would even notice him. One physician even murmured, "Good work," without a trace of sarcasm. In her private office, Sloane stood still by the glass wall. The city below, dark clouds gathering, rain tapping lightly. She didn't mind. She opened her tablet, replayed Gavin's simulation. The curve on the screen smooth, steady, precise, like the order she had always pursued. No degree, no title, no authority. And yet, she whispered to herself. A knock at the door. Arthur entered, the long-serving CTO, salt and pepper hair, a rough face but loyal, the only one in the hospital who dared speak frankly to her. "That janitor, Has the whole hospital talking. Let them talk. You think he's more than that? I don't think. I know Arthur crossed his arms. You're considering giving him a chance. Sloane's lips curved faintly. I'm considering listening to voices that don't come from the boardroom. Arthur raised an eyebrow. You've changed. Sloane said nothing. Arthur turned to leave, but before stepping out, he paused, tossing back a line. He's not just making the system better, he's making you better. The door closed. Sloane remained still. Raindrops began tracing lines down the glass, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to solve everything immediately. The invitation didn't arrive in Gavin's inbox. It came to HR, was printed out, carried across the building, and handed to him while he was mopping the floor of the cardiology wing. You're invited, the HR woman said, blinking as if she couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. The medical protocol development meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. Gavin looked up from his cart. You're sure that's not for someone else? The name says Gavin Brooks. Position, janitor. Role, protocol advisory observer. Whatever that means. It means they've run out of options, he said, standing and wiping his hands on a rag. And they're desperate. She gave a faint laugh, but there was something different in her eyes. Curiosity. Maybe even hope. That night, he didn't sleep. After putting Lena to bed, Gavin sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee beside his old medical notebook. A habit from Harvard, never broken. Do you think I can still help anyone? He whispered. In the silence, he almost heard Sarah's voice. Gavin, you were born to heal. Don't let circumstance make you forget that by morning, he was ready. 12th floor conference hall. Glass walls overlooking the city. Leather chairs surrounding an oval table. White lab coats, black suits, laptops glowing. And at the center, a gray uniform. No stethoscope, no doctor's badge, just Gavin, standing in a sea of authority. Is this the janitor? Dr. Marcus Chen, head of surgery, squinted, doubt sharp in his voice. Gavin didn't flinch. You can call me Gavin, or the man who spotted the pattern you all missed. The door opened. Sloane walked in. The air shifted instantly. He's here, she said, her voice straight as a blade. Because the post-op infection rate is still climbing despite every effort, he identified the problem. He has earned his place at this table. She lowered herself into the chair at the head. Begin. 90 minutes. Gavin didn't speak often, but when he did, the room fell silent. Think of the patient's body as a house under renovation, he said, pointing at the diagram on the screen. We're patching the roof, but forgetting to check the foundation. The infection doesn't start at the incision. It starts with how we prepare the body to receive surgery. A few nods. Dr. Patricia Wu, anesthesiology, murmured, That makes sense. Jason Marlowe sat upright, his voice sharp as steel. Excuse me, but are we seriously basing medical decisions on metaphors? Gavin turned toward him, calm, steady. When was the last time you explained to your patient why they needed surgery? Jason frowned. That's the counseling department's job. Gavin nodded slightly. Exactly. And when my 6-year-old daughter asks why her dad has to go to the hospital, what do you think I should say? Daddy needs a laparoscopic appendectomy with a prophylactic antibiotic protocol? A ripple of laughter broke out, light but genuine. Gavin continued, his voice low and firm. Sometimes the simplest explanation exposes the most complex problem. If I can't make my daughter understand why a procedure is necessary, maybe we should take another look at that procedure. After the meeting, Gavin stepped into the hallway, feeling half exhausted, half exhilarated. For the first time in years, he felt he had truly been heard. Sloane caught up with him by the elevator. "You did very well," she said. I'm not sure what I did." "You reminded them that medicine isn't just about protocols. It's about people." They shared a few beats of silence, descending together. Sloane studied her own reflection in the polished steel doors. "I had forgotten that," she murmured. "When patients become numbers instead of faces." Gavin nodded lightly. "It's understandable. When you have to make life and death decisions every day, creating distance is the only way to survive." Sloane tilted her head. "You speak like someone who's been through it." Gavin swallowed hard. "I have. Not with patients, but with Sarah. At one point I could only call her the cancer patient instead of my wife. It was the only way I could endure it." The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the lobby. Both slowed down, as if neither wanted the conversation to end. "Do you have plans for tonight?" Sloane asked, then quickly added, "I mean, there's a little restaurant I go to, 2 blocks away. They have an amazing pumpkin soup. I thought, maybe we could talk more about what happened today." Gavin raised an eyebrow. "Another meeting?" "Not official. I just want to hear more about how you see things. Your perspective is worth listening to." He smiled. "I'll have to ask Mrs. Chen to watch Lena." "Of course. The garden, 7:30. If you can make it, I'll try. I'll be waiting." "All right then, Dr. Mercer." "Call me Sloane," she corrected. "We can be more informal, outside the boardroom." That evening, the small apartment glowed with warm yellow light. Lena sat at the dining table, coloring, while Gavin adjusted his collar. "Where are you going, Dad?" she asked without looking up. "Dinner. With a friend from the hospital." "That friend? Is it the big sister lady?" Gavin froze. "The big sister lady?" Lena drew another stroke, then held up her picture. A tall, powerful-looking woman standing beside a smaller man who was smiling. "She's in my drawing. Mrs. Chen says people like that are called big sisters." Gavin chuckled, shaking his head. Maybe." Lena nodded seriously. "I like her." "You haven't even met her." "But she makes you smile differently." I can tell Gavin paused for a moment. Children and their powers of observation. Terrifying, really. The garden was small and cozy. Mismatched wooden tables, vines curling around the window frames, the air filled with the scent of herbs and toasted bread. Gavin arrived right at 7:30. A clean polo shirt, his steps a little uncertain. Sloane was already seated by the window. No black suit, no severe bun, just a gray sweater, her hair falling softly. For the first time, she looked ordinary, human. "You're right on time," Sloane said as he sat down. "Single dad habit. Being on time is a survival skill." "What did Mrs. Chen say?" Gavin chuckled. "She asked if I was going to a job interview. When I said I was meeting my boss, she said, 'Don't let them push you around.'" Sloane tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Wise advice. I'll try not to push you." They ordered pumpkin soup for Sloane, chicken sandwich for Gavin. The conversation started professional, then drifted gradually into the personal. "What do you really think about the hospital's situation?" Sloane asked. Gavin didn't dodge. "Honestly, I think people have forgotten why they studied medicine. Explain." "On the first day of med school, my professor said, 'Medicine isn't about being right, it's about helping people get better.' But here, people care more about being right than being useful." Sloane stirred her soup. "Including me?" "Especially you." She looked up, startled by his bluntness. You run the hospital like a business. That's not wrong. But do you remember the last time you actually spoke to a patient? Sloane set her spoon down, her voice lower. 6 months ago. An 8-year-old girl, car accident. She asked me if she would still be able to go to school. And what did you say? I told her mother about the surgery, about recovery. But, to the girl herself, I never answered. Gavin nodded slowly. It happens. When pain becomes daily business, you build walls just to survive. Sloane looked at him, her eyes opening for the first time. You talk like someone who's lived it. Gavin exhaled. I have. With Sarah. When she died, Lena asked why the doctors couldn't save her mom. I spent an hour explaining cancer mechanisms, instead of simply saying, sometimes even doctors can't fix everything. Sloane went still. What changed you? Lena said, Daddy, I don't understand the big words. I just want to know if Mommy was in pain. That's when I realized expertise means nothing if you can't connect with the person you're trying to save. Sloane leaned back, whispering, and that's exactly what I lost. Not lost, Gavin corrected, just buried under pressure and protocol. They ate for a few minutes in comfortable silence. Sloane broke it first. What made you want to be a doctor in the first place? When I was 8, my mom had appendicitis. But the real reason, I wanted to be like my grandfather. He was a doctor? No, he was a mechanic. But the whole neighborhood brought him broken things. He never refused, and always explained in ways people could understand. Sloane smiled. Sounds familiar. Gavin laughed. He used to say, fixing things isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about caring enough to actually look at what's broken. Sloane smiled for real. The first warm smile he'd ever seen from her. A wise man. Yes, he passed when I was in college. Lung cancer. Ironically, the doctors couldn't explain his condition in a way he could understand. Just jargon. No humanity. I'm sorry. From then on, I decided I'd be a different kind of doctor. The kind who remembers that behind every diagnosis is a human being who just wants to be well. Sloane was silent, then admitted quietly, I went into medicine because my mother wanted power. Control. She said doctors are people who never have to depend on anyone. Gavin looked at her. That's a lonely way to live. Sloane nodded. Very lonely, but safe. Safe from what? From caring too much. From hurting. When you can't save someone, Gavin set down his sandwich, leaning in. My grandfather used to say, the day you stop caring is the day you stop being useful. Pain means you're still human. Don't run from it. Learn from it. Sloane went still. He actually said that? Every word. In the hospital, right before he passed, she breathed out, her eyes brightening for a moment. What did you learn from that pain? That being smart isn't enough. You have to be kind. And kindness means being brave enough to let others see you care, even when it hurts. Silence returned to the table, but not awkward silence. The silence of two people thinking about something that mattered. Sloane spoke softly. I think I forgot how to be brave. Gavin answered gently. No. You invited me here tonight. That was brave. Sloane gave a faint smile. This was supposed to be a professional discussion. Gavin tilted his head. Was it? She looked at him, paused longer than necessary, then smiled again, a smile tinged with both bitterness and relief. No, I think I lied to us both. After admitting that she had lied to us both, the air between them shifted. Not awkward, but with a new awareness. This was no longer just a professional meeting. So what now? Gavin asked, sliding his empty sandwich plate aside. Now? I don't know, Sloane admitted honestly. I don't usually do things like this. Do what? Eat dinner? Have an honest conversation with someone. Gavin considered this. Would you like to take a walk? I need time to process after big conversations. And I'm guessing you do too. They paid and stepped outside. The night was cool, with rare stars visible above the city. They strolled slowly down the street, with no particular destination. Do you plan on returning to medicine? Sloane asked after a stretch of silence. I've thought about it. But it's complicated. I'd have to finish my final year, residency, fellowship. That means less time with Lena, less money in the short term, and what? And I'm afraid. Afraid that if I go back, I'll become like the people I just criticized. Afraid I'll forget why I wanted this in the first place. Sloane nodded. The system can change people. I'm living proof of that, but you can still change back. Maybe. With the right help, they stopped at a park bench beneath a street lamp. Gavin sat down. Sloane hesitated, then joined him, leaving a polite space between them. I have a proposal, Sloane said finally. I'm listening. We both have things we need to change. I need to remember how to be a doctor in the true sense, to connect with patients. You need to find a way back into medicine without losing your core values. And you're suggesting what? Mentorship. Informal. You help me remember how to be a better doctor. I help you find a path back without sacrificing everything. Gavin tilted his head. Sounds like a fair deal. But what? But I don't think this is just about mentorship. Sloane was silent for a long moment. No, she admitted at last. I don't think so either. So what are we talking about? I don't know. This is new for me. All right, Gavin said gently. We don't have to define it right now. We can just see what happens. You're okay with uncertainty? I've lived in uncertainty for the last 5 years. It's not the worst thing, Sloane smiled faintly. You have a daughter, and it's time you got home. That's right. And you have a hospital to run, true. They stood, walking toward Sloane's sleek black BMW. Sloane, Gavin said, as they stopped by the car. Thank you for tonight. For being honest. Thank you for reminding me that honesty can still exist. They stood there for several seconds. Neither knew what words should come next. The unmistakable sense hung between them, that something larger lingered in the air, but neither dared reach for it yet. It's late, Gavin said finally, glancing at his watch. Mrs. Chen will be wondering where I am. Of course. I'll see you at the hospital. He nodded, then added, and Sloane, about the mentorship. I think it's a good idea. Sloane gave a small smile, half in agreement, half as if keeping a secret. Good. We'll figure it out. When Gavin returned home, he found Lena asleep on the sofa, her latest drawing still in her hand. He gently took the crayon and paper away, tucked a blanket over her. The drawing showed 2 adults sitting at a table, both smiling. The caption, scrawled in uneven letters, Daddy learns how to smile again. Children see everything. Meanwhile, Sloane sat in her car for a while before starting the engine. She looked into the rearview mirror and saw the reflection of a woman she hardly recognized. Hair loose, no perfect makeup, eyes bright in a way she hadn't seen in years. For the first time in a long while, she didn't want to drive back to the office to check emails. She just wanted to go home and think about what had just happened. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to find out who the woman in the mirror really was. 3 days after dinner at the garden, Gavin was mopping the cardiology ward when a shout rang down the corridor. "Code Blue! ICU 205! Code Blue!" His medical instincts, old training that never fully left him, flared. He abandoned the cart and ran toward the alarm. ICU 205 was chaotic. A male patient in his 60s was convulsing violently in bed. The monitor was flashing wildly. A nurse frantically adjusted IV lines. A doctor barked orders. Gavin cast a quick glance and recognized a familiar pattern. Drug toxicity. "Excuse me," he called to a nurse. "Is this patient on multiple antibiotics?" The nurse frowned. "Who are you?" "Gavin Brooks, medical advisor. I need the medication list." Dr. Patricia Wu swung around. "Vancomycin, ceftriaxone, metronidazole. Why?" "When did they start?" Gavin asked. "Yesterday morning." Gavin flipped through the chart. "Does the patient have kidney impairment?" "Only mild." Still within normal limits, he shook his head. "No. With kidney function like this and that drug combo, he's accumulating toxicity. The kidneys aren't clearing it fast enough." Patricia checked the labs, her face going pale. "God, you're right. Stop the vancomycin immediately. Give fluids. Check serum drug levels." Another doctor spun to him. "Who gave you the authority to issue medical orders here?" Gavin stayed calm. "I'm not issuing orders. I'm pointing out that this patient is being harmed by the very drugs we're using." Patricia was already acting. "Right. Look at the creatinine." 15 minutes later, the seizures stopped. Vital signs stabilized. The patient had been pulled back from the brink. Patricia turned to him. "How did you pick that up?" Gavin exhaled. Pattern recognition and experience. Too many patients have suffered from well-intentioned but mistimed treatments. Sloan arrived after being paged. "What happened?" she asked. Patricia answered immediately. "Brooks just saved a life." Sloan looked at Gavin, her expression unreadable. "Come with me." The elevator ride was thick with silence. Only the whir of cables could be heard. Finally, Sloan spoke. "Do you realize what you just did?" "I prevented a medical error. You acted like a fully licensed physician, but you don't have the degree. You have no authority." Gavin's chest tightened. "I only wanted to help." "Yes, and that's precisely the problem." Her office. The door shut, city lights spilling in. Sloan stood at the glass, voice hard. "What you did, excellent, but also completely inappropriate. Legally, that's practicing medicine without a license. You could be criminally prosecuted." Gavin slumped into a chair. "So, what do we do?" Sloan turned, watching the city below. "We need to accelerate." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time for you to return to school." "Sloan, I told you." "Lena, money, time," he protested. "I heard you." She cut him off. "But after tonight, it's clear you can't just stand outside. You need official credentials to match your expertise. The hospital will help. Scholarships, flexible scheduling, even someone to care for Lena." Gavin froze. "You've thought about this." "Constantly, since that night." He stared at her. "Why?" Sloan looked back, and for the first time her gaze wasn't ice. "Because you saved a life. And the world needs doctors like you. But more than that." She faltered. "More than that." "What?" Gavin asked softly. Sloan drew a breath. "More than that. I need someone like you." To remind me why I chose this profession, the room went utterly quiet, city lights blinking down below. Gavin stood, his voice low. "So this is still advisory, mentorship?" "In part. But it's more. For the patients. For medicine. For us." A pause. Then Sloan nodded quietly. "Yes, for us." In that moment something changed forever. Not just careers, not just professional bonds, but a new beginning. Gavin smiled faintly. All right. We'll figure it out together. Sloane returned his smile. Warm, rare, almost happy. Together? Together. 3 months after that fateful conversation, Gavin's life had turned upside down. He was back at Harvard finishing his final year of medical school, working part-time as a hospital advisor, and being a full-time father to Lena. Exhausted was far too small a word. Early morning, as Gavin stuffed books into his backpack while fumbling for coffee, Lena walked into the kitchen, a slip of paper in hand. Dad, you forgot to sign the field trip form. Oh, God. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Where is it? On the kitchen shelf. And, Dad, don't say bad words. He signed quickly, then pulled her into a tight hug. But despite all his effort, sometimes he failed. Like that afternoon when Mrs. Chen called in the middle of anatomy lab. Mr. Gavin, Lena is sitting at piano class waiting. You said you'd pick her up, but you're not here. Gavin's stomach dropped. He stammered, I'm in class. Could you? No, I'm busy at the market with my grandson. In panic, Gavin texted Sloane, Emergency! Can you pick up Lena for me? I'll explain later. 20 minutes later, Sloane replied, On my way. Address? That was the first time Sloane met Lena. When Gavin got home that night, drained and guilt-ridden, the sight before him stopped him cold. Lena and Sloane sitting together at the kitchen table, books spread out, crayons scattered. Sloane, in her sleek business suit, was explaining fractions using hand-drawn pizza slices. Dad! Lena shouted. Ms. Sloane helped me with math. She explained it so well. Gavin froze in the doorway. Sloane gave a small, shy smile. Hope it's okay I broke in like this. She said she had homework. It's fine. Actually, thank you. Really? Lena hugged her crayons, nodding. I like her. She doesn't talk to me like I'm dumb. Gavin glanced at Sloane. She only shrugged lightly. I think kids have the right to ask about everything. Later, when Lena was asleep, the tiny apartment held only Gavin and Sloane, sitting on the worn-out sofa, coffee cups in hand. She's wonderful, Sloane said softly. She likes you, too. That's rare, since Sarah passed. I understand, Gavin sighed. I feel like I'm failing. School, hospital, fatherhood, none of it feels whole. You're not failing, Gavin. You're adapting. And that's a kind of strength. He gave a weary smile. Sloane turned toward him, her voice gentler. My grandfather used to say, You can't do everything perfectly. But if you can do a few things with love, that's enough. I never understood back then. But tonight, watching you with Lena, I do. Something unknotted in Gavin's chest. Then Sloane hesitated. Gavin, what if it didn't have to be this hard? What do you mean? What if you had more support? Not out of duty, but because... She faltered, her eyes wavering. Because... Gavin prompted softly. Sloane drew a deep breath. Because I've realized I've fallen for you. Not just the brilliant doctor, not just the devoted father, but also that little girl who sees the world through pizza slices. Silence settled over the room. Then Gavin gave a quiet laugh, his eyes lighting up. For the first time, you've spoken honestly, without wrapping it in medical jargon. Sloane smiled, almost bashful. That's progress, isn't it? Big progress. 2 weeks after that evening, St. Mary Hospital faced the greatest crisis in its history. The entire hospital computer system crashed at peak surgical hours. How many cases are under the knife? Sloane snapped from the emergency command center. 14 surgeries in progress, 6 ICU patients on ventilators, the head nurse reported. Backup systems? The generators are running, but every monitoring screen is dead. We're flying blind. Gavin got the emergency call and rushed over. The site was chaos. Doctors shouting orders, nurses running with clipboards, families panicking in the corridors. "What do you need?" Gavin asked Sloan. "A miracle. We have to monitor patients manually, calculate doses by hand, coordinate with people instead of machines." How long could the system be down? Could be hours, could be days. Gavin scanned the room, then took a deep breath. "All right, I have an idea. It's going to sound insane. Say it. Go old school. Pure paper, pens, and people. Every doctor, every nurse becomes a living monitoring system. Medicine existed for centuries before computers. You realize we have 200 patients?" Sloan frowned. "And 300 staff. If we organize it right, people are stronger than machines." Within an hour, Gavin transformed the hospital into a living network. Med students became runners, carrying vitals from room to room, nurses assigned to patients, hand-charting every 15 minutes, residents calculated dosages manually. Admin staff became the human database. Sloan stood watching as he commanded. His voice rang clear through the storm. "Dr. Morrison, ICU rooms 3 to 6. Manual checks every 10 minutes. Dr. Patel, you're coordinating surgeries. Everything logged on paper. No exceptions. Jenny, pharmacy runs every hour on the hour." "Insane," Jason Marlowe muttered. "This is the 21st century, not 1950. "Watch us work," Gavin replied calmly. "Humans healed for thousands of years before screens. We can do it for a few hours." The next 8 hours became the fiercest battle in the hospital's history. Gavin barely left the command floor, while Sloan carried the administrative weight at his side. At 3 a.m., disaster struck. A patient on the operating table needed an urgent transfusion. The blood bank system was down. No way to confirm blood type. "He won't survive 30 minutes waiting," Dr. Wu shouted. Gavin looked up. How many people in this building are O negative? Stunned silence. Staff, patient families, visitors, everyone. "We can rapid test in the conference hall. This is life or death. We're authorized to mobilize direct donors." 20 minutes later, 3 volunteers were ready, and the surgery was saved. When dawn broke and the computers finally came back online, a miracle was recorded. Not a single patient lost. Complication rates were even lower than average. How is this possible? Sloan stared at the stats, shaken. "Because people pay more attention when they can't lean on machines," Gavin said, drained. Last night, every nurse knew their patient better than they had in months. The story spread quickly. CNN ran the headline, "Hospital saves dozens of lives by going analog during crisis." Sloan gave the interview, but the front page photo was of Gavin. Medical advisor Gavin Brooks orchestrates entire hospital through outage. For Gavin, the real victory was smaller. Lena holding up the newspaper to Mrs. Chen. "Daddy, you're famous," she beamed. "Just a little." "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of you, too. But I didn't save anyone. You save me. Every single day." That evening, Sloan came over for dinner at the tiny apartment. For the first time, she sat at Gavin's family table. "Ms. Sloan?" Lena asked seriously over her plate of spaghetti. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Both adults froze. "Lena," Gavin stammered. "I'm just asking. At school, everyone's parents are either married, divorced, or dating. But Dad never dates anyone, except he smiles different when you're here." "Different how?" Gavin asked. "Like, really happy, not just fine." Sloan laughed, her eyes warming. "Your daughter is very perceptive." "Too perceptive," Gavin muttered. "So, are you two dating or not?" Lena pressed. Gavin and Sloan exchanged a look. "It's complicated, sweetheart." Adults always say complicated when the answer is yes, but they're scared to admit it. The innocent wisdom of a 6-year-old. 3 months after the crisis, Gavin's life had completely changed. He finished his final year at Harvard with outstanding results. St. Mary Hospital invited him into their residency program, arranging a flexible schedule so he could continue his role as consultant while also being a father. The graduation was simple, warm. Lena clapped the loudest when her father's name was called. Sloan sat beside her, smiling with pride. "Dr. Brooks!" Lena shouted, making the entire hall chuckle. After the ceremony, they returned to the park where Gavin and Sloan had first spoken about mentorship. Lena swung back and forth on the swing, the wind rushing around her. "Feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?" Sloan said, eyes on the little girl. "Much has changed," Gavin replied. "Better now?" she asked. "More real," he answered. As they sat in silence, watching Lena make friends with other children, Sloan suddenly turned serious. "Gavin, I have to tell you something." "Sounds big," he said, curious. "I just received an offer." Gavin's heart skipped. "Where?" "Chief Medical Director at Johns Hopkins." His whole body sank. "That's an incredible opportunity." "Yes, you should take it." "You think so?" "Hopkins is the dream." Sloan looked at him, her eyes distant. "Well, dreams change over time. What I wanted 5 years ago isn't what I want now." Silence settled. Gavin didn't ask further, didn't press. He just looked at her for a long time, eyes deep, as if trying to read everything unsaid. Then, instead of turning away, he exhaled softly and slipped his hand into his pocket. When he pulled it out, a small velvet box rested in his palm. "You don't need to say anything else, Sloan," he whispered, voice low and steady, dropping to one knee. "Dr. Sloan Mercer, will you marry a single dad with a crazy schedule, a 6-year-old daughter with way too many opinions, and a guy who insists on fixing things that aren't broken?" Sloan froze, eyes wide. "This is your proposal?" She half laughed, half teared up. "I had a more romantic version prepared," he said. "There's more?" "Yes. Sloan, you saved me before I even knew I needed saving. You saw value in the man I had forgotten. You taught me that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every single day, even when it's messy." "Especially when it's messy," she echoed. "Will you marry us? Not just me, but Lena too? Not perfect, but real and lasting?" Tears streamed down Sloan's cheeks. "Yes, yes, to all of it, Dad!" Lena came running, gleeful. "Is Miss Sloan crying? Did I make her sad?" "No, sweetheart. Those are happy tears." "Why is she crying happy tears?" "Because she said yes." "Yes to what?" Lena blinked, confused. Gavin looked at Sloan, then back at his daughter. "She said yes to being your mom, if you want her to." Lena's face lit up. "Really? Miss Sloan will be my mom?" "If you want me to." Sloan knelt down, looking straight into the little girl's eyes. "Mama Sarah will always be your first mom. No one can replace her. But I can be your second mom, if you want." Lena thought for a few seconds, then squealed, "Best thing ever!" She threw herself into both their arms, pulling them into a tight hug in the middle of the park. "So now we're a family, right?" Lena asked hopefully. "We've always been a family," Sloan said gently. "Now it's just official." "Can I call you Mom?" "If you want to." "And what about Mama Sarah?" Gavin asked softly, his voice tight. They had never spoken of this openly before Lena. Sloan held Lena close and whispered, "Mama Sarah will always be your first mom. No one takes that away. But luckily, you can have another mom too, if you want." "So I get to keep Mama Sarah and also have Mom Sloan?" Lena bounced with joy. Exactly. In the very park where everything had begun, they made a dream real. A true family, something none of them had dared to hope for before. Their wedding took place in a small garden beside St. Mary Hospital. Not lavish, not loud, just a handful of family, colleagues, and children's laughter. Lena, in a short white dress, held Sloane's hand and led her down the flower-lined aisle. "Dad," Lena whispered, "I have 2 moms now. I'm the luckiest girl in the world." Gavin looked at his daughter, then at Sloane, and knew she was right. That evening, when everyone had left, the 3 of them sat together on the steps, Sloane's wedding dress streaked with a little dirt, Lena dozing in her arms. No words were needed. Their eyes said it all. Family isn't only where we are born. Family is also the people we find and choose to love for the rest of our lives.